it's a real pleasure for me to introduce our moderator for this next session. So I'm delighted to say the session will be hosted by Alejandro de Cordero, he's the lead of the World Economic Forum's Airports for Tomorrow group. And within that forum, Alejandro and his team, they've done tremendous things to increase understanding of the energy and infrastructure needs for zero emission flight, or for reducing the carbon impact of flight. So it's an absolute pleasure to have Alejandro as a moderator. I don't think we could have anybody better for this role. And with that, I'll hand straight over to you, Alejandro, to introduce the session and to introduce our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you, ZeroAvia, for having this Hydrogen Summit 2024. It's a great pleasure being here and having this opportunity to moderate the panel with the wonderful lineup that has been a little bit receiving bad news. We have one of the speakers who had a last-minute issue and will not be able to join us for today, but we will work that. So there's no issue. Still, the conversation, the discussion will be quite interesting. As I said, I'm excited being here, and the topic of today is actually quite interesting. So emerging hydrogen airports and the future fuel supply chain is an interesting topic, a challenging topic that we have already started investigated in this Airports of Tomorrow initiative, the one and only aviation decarbonization initiative at the World Economic Forum. And basically, the idea of the discussion and the panel today is trying to investigate a little bit how the airports are somehow changing a little bit the mindsets between becoming just a simple passenger hub and becoming a little bit more wider energy hub, interacting with the wider ecosystem, not only the airport boundaries, but also the external community, right? So we are going to discuss a lot about infrastructure requirements for hydrogen, safety protocols and procedures, the techno-economics of the hydrogen airport, so how feasible, how viable is that in order to happen, what are the different use cases, and also what are the collaboration opportunities, and more widely, what will be the government support that will be needed to try to accelerate that transition into the airports. With that said, let me just remind you that to all the audience, if you have any question, please use the Q&A button that you have on your bottom of your screen, and I'll be happy to navigate through those questions and ask them to the relevant panelists as the discussion develops. With that said, let me just briefly introduce our panelists for today. So we have, in alphabetic order, Dave Lees, CEO of Bristol Airport. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you. Welcome.
We have also Todd Earnst, Director for Energy and Environment at GTAA, Greater Toronto Airports Authority. Hello, Todd. Welcome.
Hello. Pleased to be here. Thank you.
And we have Wilma van Dijk, CEO of Rotterdam the Hague Airport. Welcome, Wilma.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
As I said, unfortunately, we had Karin Genan, Vice President of ZeroE ecosystem at Airbus, that had a last-minute issue, and she will not be able to join. And hopefully, Florian Chevallier from ENGIE Energy Solutions is joining us soon. So let's start with a very simple question, maybe an open question for those that are a little bit skeptical about what is a hydrogen airport. So obviously, the concept of implementing hydrogen into the aviation industry is already challenging. But when you think about that concept from the airport perspective, it brings not only challenge, but also maybe opportunity. So maybe that's the big question that I have for you guys. Open question, what are the biggest challenges in implementing hydrogen, and what is the biggest opportunity? Who wants to start? Maybe Dave, you want to go first?
Yeah, by all means. So welcome, everybody. Dave Lees, as Chief Executive of Bristol Airport, key regional airport in the UK. So I think some of the challenges, and we'll no doubt touch on some of these, relate to the safety of handling hydrogen through its transportation and refueling capability. And secondly, in terms of the cost, and I'm sure once again, we're going to come on to this in the future because we're at a relatively early stage. In terms of opportunities, I mean, I start from a kind of a 38,000 foot perspective, which is ensuring that aviation can still be an economic generator for our great cities, regions, which all our airports provide around the world, because we need to ensure that that is maintained, particularly in an unstable world, to drive forward economic growth into the future. But importantly, allied to that is to ensure, certainly in the UK, to make sure we get to net zero by 2050. Hydrogen will form a part of that, as it will for other forms of transport as well. So those are the two opportunities, high level, but I'm sure we're going to come to the detail. Thanks, Alejandro.
Thanks, Dave. So that is actually a very good point, how we are going to implement hydrogen in the wider net zero roadmap. We are not only focusing on SAF, hydrogen is part of an overall roadmap for the industry. Wilma, challenges and opportunities for hydrogen innovation.
Well, I pass on the line of Dave, and yes, of course, SAF and electric is one way of energy barrier, but hydrogen is very important for the mid-haul distance. And there's no choice. We need to develop. The challenge, well, the opportunity, let's start with the opportunity. As a CEO of a small airport, but part of the Schiphol group, we're a playground to explore what is possible. So every small airport can have a very important part in the innovation, which is there to stay and needs to be, because we need to make this net zero ambition. A role as an airport is all about being the linking pin, connecting parties that supply hydrogen with parties that demand hydrogen. And there comes the challenge. What is your role as an airport? I think that we can explore also more about it, but when it comes to opportunities, we see ourselves as front runner, and together with all the stakeholders here in this panel, because we can say it's a big apple to eat, but if we don't take this as small step by step and by learning, we will never cross over the bridge we need to take.
That's good. Thank you, Wilma. I like the idea of having this airport in the, let's say, at the core of this demand enabler for the wider ecosystem. Let's see what Todd thinks about these challenges and opportunities. Todd?
Yeah, I would echo pretty much everything that's been said. I really see, the opportunity, the big opportunity for airports obviously is decarbonizing flight, but there are lots of opportunities on the ground. And I think the opportunity that flows from that is for airports to play a role in the initial hydrogen backbone ecosystem for the broader community, possibly the state. So in the case of Toronto Pearson, we're facing a challenge that I think a lot of airports are either already facing or will be facing, where growth and decarbonization are both contributing to load growth, electrical load growth that we've never seen before. And we sit in an urban grid-constrained environment where the availability of electricity to facilitate our pathway to net zero is becoming increasingly constrained. So hydrogen is providing us another arrow in the quiver. It's another tool to help us to decarbonize. So I really see opportunities for airports to take a leadership role in the build out and the evolution of hydrogen infrastructure. Cost was talked about as one of the challenges. I think the key challenge that will also help to address cost is getting reliable hydrogen at scale. Once we can get those economies of scale, and I think for large airports, one of the keys is going to be pipeline supply. So we're embarking on a feasibility study next year to determine what is the techno-economic feasibility of using existing rights of ways for jet fuel to provide pipeline hydrogen to the airport.
Thanks, Todd. There are 2 points that I really like. One is that you mentioned growth. I would like to follow up on that, because actually most of the people, when think about the growth of the industry, they just think about the number of planes, but they don't think about the number of passengers that need the infrastructure at the airport, right? So that's also a tricky point of view. And regarding the reliability of the hydrogen that will be used, I would like to bring in Florian Chevallier. Florian, welcome to the panel. Very timely.
Yeah.
We were just discussing about the biggest challenges and the biggest opportunities for when we are talking about implementing hydrogen in the aviation. And I would like to have your perspective from an energy producer. How do you see this industry implementing hydrogen?
So, hi everyone. I think one of the first challenges is to identify the cases where hydrogen could be relevant. And I think we can agree on the fact that hydrogen will not be the unique solution on airports. There are many other solutions that can be implemented. I think about battery electrical vehicles, for example. So what is crucial for us is to identify the cases where hydrogen will be economically and technically the best solution to implement in the airports. And for me, the second one is economic. We know that the development of hydrogen requires significant investments to build ecosystems with production, distribution, transportation, storage. And the creation of such ecosystems will require huge investments, while the pace of development of uses is quite slow today. And for it to be viable, we will need to have some support, regulatory support, and some subsidies to grow and to scale up with this energy.
Thanks, Florian. That's a great overview of, let's say, what are the challenges and actually the points of the discussion that we are going to tackle during this panel. So let me focus on the first block of let's say, the questions. You talk about infrastructure, you talk about the economics, how the different use cases could be economically viable for the airport, and what is the support needed. Let's focus a little bit on the first part of that. So the infrastructure requirements. So we have 3 airports that have done some tests on hydrogen already. So I wanted to understand a little bit how are those infrastructure requirements deploying in those different use cases, and have some lessons learned from that. So Wilma, maybe I start with you first, because Rotterdam is doing an interesting project between the port and the airport. So how are you handling this hydrogen in the ground, this huge infrastructure, and what are the requirements that you are seeing already that you will need to develop?
Thank you for this question, because it highlights the opportunity the airport has, because it's within 30 kilometers where there is the biggest airport of Europe. At least we think it's the biggest airport, port of Europe. And to make it more clear, the port of Rotterdam currently delivers 24% of the European demand of kerosene within Europe. So it's supplied via Rotterdam. And we also know that the port has a lot of knowledge on hydrogen, because that's also in their location. So the opportunity is to see how we can collaborate, because as an airport, you need to be ready with your infrastructure. But the question is, should I create infrastructure myself as a sort of energy hub, or can I get a cooperation with the port who has the same ambition? So this is what we're doing. We're aligning, so we're testing together. How do you get hydrogen as a plant in the port, which is the responsibility of the port itself? And the question between them and us is, how do we transport the hydrogen as a supply to the airport? You can get pipelines, but to see first is, how would you truck this? And how can you learn from having trucks with hydrogen to an airport? And there we first got to have a permit from the government to see, can we create a storage at our site to make this truck with our products from the port to the airport, and that we can storage it there with a dispenser, and to bring another pilot to bring the hydrogen to the airplane. So this is a step-by-step approach. And because of the cooperation with the port, the government is also very willing to explore how this can be made possible. So I'm very happy, and that is an opportunity to have this permit, which is quite unique, but you need to have it to learn about fire brigade personnel. How do they cooperate with that? What would be the standards on that? How will the tracking be? What do you need technically to make it via the dispenser to the airplane? So I'm talking about a supply chain with a lot of steps, but it will we're doing this together, and we learn from each other. We share our information to the other airports, and by that, I think we're building an infrastructure, we're building standards together to make it possible.
Very interesting approach. I really like the idea of merging these two different industries into one single project. I will ask you maybe later who made the first step, because that is also interesting to understand. You were? Okay, that's good.
Yeah, and that's because I'm part of the Schiphol group. So of course, the long-term approach is all airports, the small and the big one, need to have the possibility to make a choice between SAF, electric, and hydrogen. It's a question for all of us.
That's true, because most likely, depending on the size and the archetype of the airport, you will have a different distribution process.
True.
And so it depends on the business model. Let me just pause here, because that's a very interesting point. Todd, I'll bring you in. So what about, because we were mentioning before that your feasibility study that you're running together with Airbus, ZeroAvia, and other organizations, it's very much focused on the flight for hydrogen. But what about the ground tests? What about the ground use cases that Florian was bringing before? Have you already mapped those at Toronto?
To a large extent, yes. It's still a work in progress, but the uses of hydrogen on the ground, I really see that as the necessary first step to building the infrastructure that will get us to flight. Like I said, we've got electrical constraints already that we need to address on our pathway to net zero. We already have a hydrogen fill station on site. It's on the ground side through a partnership with a local company, Carlson Energy, partly funded by the federal government. And it is in Ontario, the first hydrogen fill station that's publicly accessible, and both providing 700 and 350 bar, meaning that it can service both light vehicles and heavy trucks and buses and the like, right? This was a step forward for us to start getting our feet wet, both with some hydrogen fleet of our own, to run some hydrogen trials for vehicles and equipment that we can bring to the air side, because it's fairly close to the fence. And we have 1 million cars and trucks that pass by our airport every single day. And so the publicly accessibility and the ability to integrate with the broader transportation and energy ecosystem, it's there, and it's something that we need to start to do.
That's good, interesting. So Dave, I turn to you. So basically, we have been, let's say, going from the wider infrastructure project from Rotterdam, going a little bit smaller to Toronto, but we see that in both projects are basically collaborations with other industries. How was your tests? How was your pilot trials at Bristol Airport? Tell us a little bit more lessons learned and how you are applying those to the long-term vision of the airport, please.
Sure. No, thank you. First of all, I must congratulate both Wilma and Todd, because working in this space is really challenging, if I'm honest, and to get a permit like Wilma's achieved, and the work which Todd's doing is no mean feat. And that kind of reflects the work which we did earlier this year. So we were the first airport in the United Kingdom to actually complete a successful trial of bringing gaseous hydrogen airside and actually deploying it successfully. And what I mean successfully is deploying it into a baggage tug, which was then used to pull luggage using the usual standard baggage carts out to live aircraft. So we did this in conjunction with EasyJet over a period of a week, really to ascertain the safety case, like Wilma said. So I wouldn't underestimate the amount of time taken to actually create and get the regulator, in our case, the Civil Aviation Authority, to actually approve the safety case for use of hydrogen in an airside environment. We were really lucky to work with EasyJet, but once again, it's a new case in terms of using gaseous hydrogen in an airside environment adjacent to live operations. Shouldn't be underestimated, but also our own fire service in terms of undertaking work in conjunction with them in terms of how they would respond to what would be a very different type of incident. But you'd be pleased to hear we took a very structured approach to that in terms of working with different partners, in terms of the operators of the tug, in terms of DHL, the actual airline, but also running offline trials at Cranfield University, first of all, to understand in a an easier type of environment, utilizing the vehicle, getting used to it before actually deploying it into an airside environment. What were the learnings? Well, the learnings are kind of quite numerous, actually, and the learnings are publicly available. This isn't something which we're using, to commercial advantage, because we're all on this journey together. It takes a long time. Don't underestimate, particularly around regulatory approval. You have to collaborate hard. There's some tactical learning points in terms of how you actually use and deploy gaseous hydrogen in terms of refueling, for instance. Common, I'm sure, both at Toronto and also at Rotterdam, and probably other user cases. But some of the key things for us in terms of lessons is it would be great to be able to have some more central strategic guidance. You have to work with a number of different regulatory bodies. It would be great to be able to have greater capability at a national and perhaps international level in terms of how to deploy hydrogen. And then secondly, don't underestimate even just the transport of hydrogen requires certain types of certified vehicles, certified drivers. So all of things perhaps which sat outside the fence take a long time. How are we employing that in the future? Well, we've just published our master plan to 2040, which will take us to 15 million passengers. And we've actually highlighted an area for hydrogen storage. We've also been doing some offline work, bearing in mind this is going to take some time to deploy hydrogen along with SAF and Jet A1 in terms of what we think the uptake will be and the methodology. We personally think it will be tanker first of all, certainly for the first 10 to 15 years. By then we'll be an airport of 15 million before getting to a piped solution. So hopefully that gives some insight, but all credit to my colleagues elsewhere as well. Thank you.
That's great, Dave. It's actually a very comprehensive view of how the tests are leading to a change in the master planning of the airport, which is, I guess, one of the, because there are like two key takeaways from that. That's one is that we are learning, but not only for us, but it's for the, let's say, the wider benefit of the industry. And also that we are also trying to implement those learnings into our own airport master planning to make a successful business model out of the airport, which I think is the critical part. Florian, you mentioned before several challenges. Now that we have done the round of the airports, are you a little bit more optimistic about hydrogen becoming a mainstream energy source for aviation industry, or still not?
Hopefully, I'm convinced that hydrogen will be the molecule for the future for airports. But we have some challenges, and hydrogen is not a miracle molecule. It has been a very long time that we are producing hydrogen, but it is gray hydrogen, so carbonized hydrogen. And the really good challenge is to produce green hydrogen. That is more and more difficult to do with electrolyzers. And the question today is, are we able in the future to produce massively and safely green hydrogen? This is a good question, and we don't have nowadays the answer. Second point, we know that aviation is not the only sector that will need green hydrogen. We have a lot of sectors who will need green hydrogen to decarbonize. I think about industry, chemicals, steels, a lot of industries, and a lot of mobility solutions. Aircrafts, airports, aviation, okay, but there are still trains, heavy trucks, boats. So there is some competition in with green hydrogen, and we don't have any abundant quantities today. But so the question is, in 10 or 15 years, are we able to produce massively hydrogen? Nowadays in ENGIE, our politic is to begin with small assets from 1 megawatt to 10 megawatts. We think that we are at the beginning of the story. And so we are at the same stage as we were with renewable energies 10 or 15 years ago. And so we have to build experience, to do small assets, to see how we can operate them safely, and to improve significantly the performance of our electrolyzers. So we have a lot to do to give you all around this call green hydrogen with low cost and with high standards of security.
Yes. So let's say you got my mood a little bit down. I have to say. But let's try to keep the positive. So I understand that there are some techno-economical challenges. I understand that we are basically relying on the ideal world on the green hydrogen, but maybe with low carbon hydrogen at the very beginning, at least for this feasibility test, is enough. We are on a learning phase a little bit if we talk about these pilot tests that are happening in several spots around the world. So that brings actually the next block of the discussion, which is the financial, the economics, but also the environmental benefits. So I would like to, as you have already highlighted several challenges from the economic point of view, Wilma, I would like to ask you, how do you balance, when you present these projects from Rotterdam Airport and the port, and the government brings in their view, how do you balance this investment that is needed with the environmental benefit or the potential environmental impact? Is that part of the equation? How was that in the negotiation process?
It's a very good and tough point. In the Netherlands, many have an opinion on flying. So when it comes to the long-term vision, it's the view of my airport and myself and Schiphol Group that, without saying, everyone wants to keep on flying. And we know that the figures will increase on the long term. But how to do this in a sustainable way? And this is a responsibility for an airport as far as it is your own responsibility, but it is also a part of a responsibility of the community with the airliners, but also the societies as such. And with that, it links to my license to operate. And I need to get a new license to operate, in which I only get the license for the future if I make the step up on a more sustainable way of flying. Mm-hmm. So by that, I have a buy-in with the government if I invest in hydrogen pilots and making the steps forward. And I do it together with the port, this is the ecosystem. And we have plans in the port companies investing in plans. So the economical part is everyone foresees that it is the way to go. everyone needs to make up the step up, but the step up because we have Fit for 55, for example, we have this responsibility issue, we have the Paris climate, we cannot look away. It's for the generations after us, we need to make the difference. And by that, I know everyone says it will be too expensive. It's about the tipping point. It's about the chicken and the egg.
Yeah.
And there we think we seek for collaboration, we dare to make the step up, we try to get results, and we know we can do it. We start flying 100 years ago, we succeeded, and we can succeed in this too. And the money, yes, this scarcity point Florian is mentioning, I understand, but there the regulators also need to help in the decision on the scarcity. We cannot say I'm coming first, or the maritime or others come first, but we need to have one way of approach in which we can develop our destination. Do you understand?
Yeah. It's a very good point. Actually, it brings up a kind of interesting discussion, which is let's try to get ourselves into the investors' shoes for a moment. And if you are being presented or being introduced to a hydrogen airport project, from the investor's perspective, does it make sense to have isolated kind of use cases for the airport? So an airport that is only focusing on, I don't know, refilling, an airport that is only focusing on storage, as Dave mentioned before, or does it make sense from the investment point of view to kind of merge all those potential demands, not only from the use cases of the airports, but also bringing in the other industries? Will that unlock the investments that are needed for driving the infrastructure or not? Is it maybe a too tricky question? Maybe Dave, you want to come in based on your experience?
Sorry, I've only just managed to rejoin. Can I just tune in to the question in a second? Sorry, I was just getting the back end of that. But...
Sure, no worries. I'll go to Todd. So Todd, so is this future demand like a collaborative demand with other industries is playing significantly from the investor's point of view? Do you think that that will help unlock the investment?
Well, yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I'm not sure any of us really has the answer fully sussed out, but based on what I'm seeing, it's the chicken and egg problem has been mentioned already, right? And that needs more than just one or two players to solve. So the collaboration is absolutely necessary to address the chicken and egg, so that investors can have confidence that they can build facilities because there are off-takers for the volumes that they are planning to produce, right? That's the ultimate key to getting this off the ground. Pardon the pun. Yeah, so I think the short answer is yes. Now, and it's an interesting concept that some airports might specialize in certain aspects. I'm not really sure. I'd look to others for their opinions on exactly how that might impact investment. But yeah,
let's bring Florian. What do you think from a hydrogen producer perspective? Is just adding more use cases, not only from the airports but from the other industries, is helping to, let's say, support those infrastructure challenges and infrastructure changes that needs to be around the airports, or will just be more complex and the investors will be a little bit afraid of putting some money in?
When you are an investor, and especially in ENGIE, when I go to the COMEX to have some money to develop some projects in hydrogen, the first question is, what are the uses? And do you have any contract signed with quantities and price to sell hydrogen? And so I don't have any, because it is the beginning of the story. So if we can place one electrolyzer, big electrolyzer, and have many uses in one region, So to create one ecosystem with multiple customers, with maritime, train, heavy trucks, one industry, that's what we are trying to do today in ENGIE, to have some common hubs, to have more capacities, not only 1 megawatt, but 10 or 20 megawatt of production, to decrease the price of hydrogen and to sell it to other customers that can be airports, heavy trucks, and other customers, including for sure industries.
Got it. Dave, now that you are reconnected into the question.
Yeah, I've listened to everybody else's answer now, so that's great, isn't it?
Yes.
I suppose you've got to remember airports are long-term investors. And what I mean by that is, you know, look at the investments which are made usually over a 10, 25, sometimes 50-year time horizon. And whilst we may have all got different kind of shareholders, whether they be private, public, they'll still be looking for a return. And, you know, they'll look at the risk environment, the cost, and the returns. And at this stage, you know, it's very, very early in the cycle to actually understand what the investment case is. And whilst it doesn't do any harm to have, you know, other sectors involved, we certainly have with the port, but it's still at a relatively, you know, early stage in terms of adoption. I think we'd all agree with that in terms of the user cases for hydrogen. Hopefully they'll grow in the coming years, but at the moment that would be a very challenging business case as I sit here today to actually build and spend 10, 20, 50 million pounds worth with an unanswered business case. It would be a bold person to go in front of a board with a business case at this precise moment, and therefore all the work we need to do around safety, user cases, starts to de-risk as well as working with other sectors.
Thanks, Dave. I've been checking the Q&A. There are some of the questions that we have unveiled here. There are some of the others that obviously we don't have time, and they're quite interesting questions. But there is one question about, let's say, the pathways for the airports to implement, let's say, the first step into hydrogen implementation for the airports. So I would like to link you this question specifically from the chat with the priorities for 2025. So if we are going to create the future hydrogen airport in 10, 15 years time, what will be the key priority for you to focus on 2025 to accelerate that process, if there is only one? Anyone brave enough?
Well, I suppose perhaps if I start, I mean,
Sure.
I believe, and I think Wilma said it at the beginning, this is all about incremental steps rather than big, enormous steps. And there's good reason for that. This is a new, you know, technology. So it may not sound very ambitious, but for ourselves, building out a set of pioneering airports where we continue to adopt user cases may not sound enormous, but actually it builds a network, it builds further user cases, it starts to de-risk and any kind of investment cases. It also builds relationship with airlines, OEMs, because ultimately airports are all about ecosystems and building confidence around the adoption of new technology, the adoption of skills is absolutely fundamental. So it's incremental step change working with other airports.
Thanks, Dave. Todd, can I bring you in?
Yeah, I'm going to cheat and offer two priorities. So, you know, in tandem, you know, we're focused on small scale pilots, you know, proving out the case, and hardware really talks, and it plants a seed that, you know, we're already starting to see grow faster than we anticipated it would. But at the same time, in 2025, like I said, we're focused on studies to identify what is that long-term pathway and what are some of the, you know, what do the barriers look like as well as the potential, so that we can flag that for, you know, anybody who can, you know, partner with us, work with us, for the governments to step in and help to address, so that we can keep that momentum going beyond.
Sounds good. We will discuss about the governments in another panel, hopefully. Florian, we'd like to hear your thoughts. What will be the key priorities for 2025 to make this happen?
Yes, I have both priorities. I totally agree with Dave. We have to to develop small projects to prove to all stakeholders that hydrogen is a good solution and that there is technically and economically a path to find with hydrogen. And the second one is stability in regulation in all countries. And it is not that we want a lot of subsidies or a lot of money, but we have to have the one cap, one strategy, long-term strategy, and that the cap is really stable and not each month to have a lot of subsidies. The next month, or there's no money, so you can't develop any project, and it changes each year. So I think it would be a good idea to have some agreement at European level or worldwide to develop all the filière hydrogen.
Sounds good. Ambitious request, but we'll go for that. I know conscious about the time, but just the final word to Wilma. Wilma, any final thought on the priorities for 2025 to make this happen?
Yes, of course. Make a roadmap, long-term roadmap. And in this roadmap, the goal is cooperation between airports and partners in the value chain. And by that, obtaining permits for ground handling, storage, fueling, etc. Second, setting up concept of operations. Making infrastructure, training staff safely, handling of hydrogen. And the last one is validation of these steps to see if it works. And all these elements, put it in your roadmap every time you make a step-by-step, because yes, we need to take it step by step, and doing together and sharing together, it will make it happen.
Thank you, Wilma. That's inspiring. Thank you all the panelists. I know we are 2 minutes out of time. I'm sorry about that, Dominic, but I guess that we have a very interesting discussion. Thank you very much to all of you guys. You made a wonderful job.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much to
Thank you very
Alejandro.
much.